Merry Christmas and welcome to a very special edition of Channel's Business Global. I'm Juliana Olayinka, coming to you from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking back at our international coverage of COVID-19. As the plague year draws to an end, at the time of this recording, the deadly virus has infected over 70 million people and killed over 1.6 million worldwide. Here's a Channel's Business Global international flashback. According to sources, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi may announce a phased exit from the country's lockdown to kickstart the world's fifth largest economy. Last month's unprecedented move impacted over 1 billion people and left tens of thousands of migrant workers jobless and without a place to stay. Amidst the grim reality of the world economic outlook, economists expect a quick recovery for India. Small growth this year against a contraction for the rest of the world. For more on this, I'm now being joined by the foreign correspondent for India Today, Lavina Tandon. Lavina Tandon, welcome to the show. According to some sources, the Prime Minister may announce an end, or at least a phasing to an end of the lockdown this weekend. Do you think that's too soon?
It is a big question that everybody is facing around the globe, because the only exit strategy really we have from still social distancing, apart from social distancing and lockdown, is really a vaccine and a drug. And in the absence of which, it has to be some kind of phased lockdown, which is what India is trying to do, considering a lot of its states do not have as much of the pandemic. And in India, it's a unique situation, Juliana, because it is a question of life versus livelihood as well. There are so many people who might die of hunger, if not of the virus. So it's something that has to be really looked at very. So I cannot say that it is very soon. Some measures have to be put out, especially when not all the states are that badly affected. So it's a very tricky decision as long as the healthcare is ready to really take the spike if it happens, which is what they are saying. The lockdown will be managed out, which is an essential for lots and millions of daily wage workers.
It's interesting, Lavina, that you mentioned these daily wage workers. We've got a similar issue happening in Africa. You can't necessarily follow what the West are doing when you're dealing with people with a completely different set of circumstances. But I want to ask you about those daily wages and those who work within the gig economy, because, of course, we all saw those pictures of a couple of weeks ago with your bus stations and train stations literally flooded with people who overnight had lost their jobs. Were there any stimulus packages or financial handouts given to them from the government?
Yes, they were given, but are they enough or not is the big question. And they clearly are not enough because, as you say, India and Africa come with their unique situation. It is this gig pay-as-you-go freelance economy that makes it very vibrant, young and kicking above their weight as far as all the others are concerned. India is fifth in number as far as gig economy goes, and it keeps it going, and that will keep on going as long as the government can provide some stimulus. Now, as far as stimulus as of now, yes, they have provided for those people who have something called Aadhaar card, and they will get X amount of money in their bank account and 5 kgs of rice and all 5 rice and wheat and 1 kg of pulse. So all that is happening, but is that enough? And the question is that India is so huge. And there are so many people who are in this situation that they have to cater out to, that it is a very, very cumbersome and uphill task. So it has happened, but not completely. People are still suffering with hunger, and they rather have the lockdown gone than die of hunger.
On the surface, it may appear that the escalating tensions between Beijing and Washington is about who's to blame for coronavirus becoming a global mess. However, analysts believe that both sides are drawing battle lines in longer-term disputes about global economic and political leadership. The virus has weighed heavily on both countries, plunging their economies into the deepest contractions for decades and destroying tens of millions of jobs. President Donald Trump's recent threat of new tariffs on China and suggestions from Beijing that it could counter with other dramatic punitive actions are adding to the tensions. For more on this, joining me via Skype in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, is market analyst Han Tan from Forex Time Limited. Han Tan, thanks so much for joining us on Channels Business Global. There's no denying, even amongst those of us that are not necessarily news savvy, that this pandemic has really escalated the tensions between America and China. What's gone wrong?
I think what we're seeing here is the sheer need for political capital, right? Because if you recall, coming into this year, you had a U.S. president that was flying high, politically speaking at least. The U.S. economy was in a much better place compared to its major peers. Then in January, the U.S. and China signed a trade deal, but this COVID-19 pandemic has just pulled the rug from under him. We are now seeing the U.S. economy in a recession, over 20 million jobs lost in the month of April alone. And also, President Trump seems like he needs a scapegoat right now. And that's why we're seeing the potential return of tariff man, so to speak. He needs something to galvanize his voter base between now and November.
I think that's a thorough analysis there. So clearly it seems to be power that's dominating the tensions. And as you mentioned as well, trade, those tariffs are set to increase. There are concerns that this could even potentially turn into a full-blown conflict. But I would say that WHO, the World Health Organization, appeared to be at the center of this. Would you not say that some of the concerns that the US President Donald Trump has could be valid?
Well, I guess it would be valid within the nationalistic sentiment or within that context that he employs. Now, granted, that is a context that is not new and it's not born out of the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, this kind of sentiment predates it, actually, and we are seeing it in the current U.S. administration, the current UK administration, and also in pockets of Europe as well. I think these are concerns that he may have on the domestic front is not necessarily shared on the global stage, at least in terms of those who still hold on to the romantic notion or seemingly romantic notion of globalization, especially in this kind of environment.
African nations have ordered curfews and lockdowns in response to the growing coronavirus epidemic, raising fears of turmoil for low-income workers in cash-strapped governments across the continent. Niger announced its first coronavirus fatality on Tuesday, alongside Cape Verde, after a 62-year-old British tourist died. Cameroon also recorded its first death, a man who had contracted the disease in Italy and tested positive on March the 14th. At least 4 people have died in Burkina Faso, which is West Africa's worst-hit country, with 115 confirmed cases. South Africa has the highest number of confirmed coronavirus cases in sub-Saharan Africa, and public health experts are worried that the virus could overwhelm the health system if infection rates rise steeply. For more on this, I'm joined by African analyst Tamsanka Zhou. There are almost 3,000 cases, confirmed cases of coronavirus in Africa. A third of them appear to be in South Africa. Why is this?
Well, it all depends on the way that what you call the index or offense happened. So in countries like South Africa, if it took some time for them to pick that up, by the time people go into quarantine, then there are already other people that are carriers. And also, you should realize that South Africa is a hub in terms of transport. So it's South Africa and a country like Ethiopia. These are countries where, you know, the airports were always very busy. And these airports, the planes were coming from countries that were already affected. So you would expect that before any action could be taken, before the lockdowns were in place, there were already people who were carriers in the community.
Ghana has become the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to ease movement restrictions after a 21-day lockdown of its biggest cities. The move has been met with mixed emotions. In recent weeks, African governments have been criticised for replicating the coronavirus prevention strategies of wealthier countries without taking into account key differences and the need to adapt to the local environment. For more on this, I'm now being joined by Olusegun Okubanjo founder and chief executive officer of Obsidian, a leading London-based corporate and project finance firm that is committed to supporting private sector-led growth in the continent. It's interesting, the president has addressed the nation several times and he emphasised the difficulty of the lockdown facing the poor. And there has been now growing criticism faced towards Africa because everybody's saying that, you know, treat Africans the way Africa needs to be treated. Don't just copy and paste what the heads of states are doing in Britain and in America and trying to lock down. Do you think that's too harsh? Do you agree with that?
I mean, look, economic considerations play a huge role, not just in Africa, but in every market and country that's been affected by this global crisis. And in Africa, the policymakers are right to adapt these restrictions or responses to suit the needs of their specific societies. And I mean, yes, it might seem riskier or change the balance of risk, but short breaks, curfews, wider general restrictions, mandatory wearing of masks, they're options beyond just a complete shutdown. And you also have to remember that in Africa, a large proportion of the workforce is self-employed. I mean, in the UK, 86% of the people are employees. But in Ghana, and many African countries, 80% are self-employed. So of those that are even employees, more required to supplement their income in the informal sector because of the relatively lower wages. And so it makes sense for governments to be sensitive to the economic and social necessity.
Well, fast forward 7 months and the African Centre for Disease Control and Prevention has talked of a second wave arriving on the continent. So far, the virus has infected over 1.7 million people there and killed over 24,000. Despite the poor health system in many African countries, the recorded mortality rate per capita in the continent has been low relative to the data from the global north. To Britain now, and there were mass scenes of celebrations as the UK became the first country in the world to begin the inoculation of its citizens. But the jubilation was short-lived, as last weekend a new variant of coronavirus was discovered within the Isles, one that scientists say is up to 70% more transmissible. The revelation led to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson imposing tougher restrictions on 16 million people just days before Christmas.
First, we will introduce new restrictions in the most affected areas, specifically those parts of London, the South East and the East of England, which are currently in Tier 3. These areas will enter a new Tier 4, which will be broadly equivalent to the national restrictions which were in place in England in November. That means residents in those areas must stay at home, apart from limited exemptions set out in law. Non-essential retail, indoor gyms and leisure facilities and personal care services must close. People must work from home if they can, but may travel to work if this is not possible, for example, in the construction and manufacturing sectors. People should not enter or leave Tier 4 areas, and Tier 4 residents must not stay overnight away from home. Individuals can only meet one person from another household in an outdoor public space. Unlike the November national restrictions, communal worship can continue to take place in Tier 4 areas, and these measures will take effect from tomorrow morning. All tiers will continue to be regularly reviewed in line with the approach previously set out, with the next formal review taking place on the 30th of December. Second, we're issuing new advice on travel. Although the new variant is concentrated in Tier 4 areas, it is nonetheless present at lower levels around the country. So we're asking everyone in all tiers to stay local. People should carefully consider whether they need to travel abroad, and they should follow the rules in their tier.
European shares also slumped at the start of the week as the rapid spread of the new strain led to a travel ban for UK passengers from many countries. After ending last week higher, the pan-European stock 600 index slid 2.3%. Worries about the fresh hit to an economic recovery saw London's FTSE drop 2.1%, whilst the pound sank against the dollar. Travel and leisure stocks shed 5.5% and were on course for their worst day in 3 months, while oil majors led losses in Europe as new restrictions spurred worries about a hit to demand and weighed on crude prices.
We are seeing a mix of deadly data and very good data. The deadly data is the ongoing Brexit debate and, of course, the mutation of the virus. At the same time, we will likely see the approval in Europe for what is hopefully a miracle cure, the vaccine. Also, the Americans finally decided on a new stimulus package. Finally, this stubbornness is over, and that will certainly at least help to stabilise the stock market. The outlook for next year is good, so that investors will buy stock before the end of the year. Monetary policy remains in the fast lane. There will be new stimulus packages and there will be more and more vaccines, which is a light at the end of the tunnel. But what's needed in Germany are 3 things: vaccinations, vaccinations, vaccinations.
Impfen, impfen, impfen.
This news also affected travelling plans. Canada, as well as Britain's European neighbours, including Germany, Italy and the Netherlands, ordered a suspension of flights from the country, while France's ban also included freight carriers, whether by road, air, sea or rail. Hundreds of truck drivers have been left stranded in southern England. Both countries discussed testing truck drivers to get freight moving again. Coming up on Channel's Business Global, I'll be looking back at the biggest COVID-related company stories of the year. See you after the break. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Across the globe, millions of jobs have been lost, most notably in retail and aviation. According to the International Air Transport Association, the COVID-19 pandemic is expected to cause nearly $160 billion worth of losses in the aviation sector. The association's expectation is that $118.5 billion losses will be this year and $38.7 billion in 2021. In retail, the effect of the coronavirus lockdown came on top of the sector's existing problems. According to The Economist, under lockdown, e-commerce as a share of American retail sales increased as much in 8 weeks as it had in the previous 5 years. As people work from home, travel on the New York subway fell by over 90%. This scene has been replicated in big cities across the world. British fashion retailers Monsoon and Accessorize will close 35 stores, make 545 staff redundant and seek rent cuts for remaining shops as part of a restructuring led by its founder to survive the COVID-19 crisis. Administrators from business advisory firm FRP were appointed late on Tuesday and immediately sold the company's business and assets to Adena Brands, a company ultimately controlled by Peter Simon. British airline Virgin Atlantic has finalised a rescue deal valued at £1.2 billion, removing the medium-term chance of administration because of the coronavirus crisis. The deal, which will involve a £200 million backing from Richard Branson's Virgin Group and hedge fund Davidson Kempner, was confirmed late on Tuesday. Virgin Atlantic said the refinancing covered the next 5 years and paved the way for it to rebuild its balance sheet and return to profitability in 2022. Pizza Express has become the latest UK-based restaurant to announce that it could be closing about 67 of its restaurants, putting up to 1,100 jobs at risk. The chain said it's planning to launch a company voluntary arrangement in the near future in a bid to push down its rents. This comes amid a significantly more challenging environment following the coronavirus pandemic and UK-wide lockdown, which closed restaurants for several weeks. Tiffany & Co. has won the very first round in its billion-dollar battle with LVMH. The judge has agreed to fast-track the case, setting a January the 5th, 2021 date for the luxury good purveyor's 4-day trial. In November, LVMH and Tiffany announced that the conglomerate would acquire the jeweller for $16.2 billion. Originally billed as the largest ever transaction in luxury goods. The deal fell apart in recent weeks after LVMH claimed that the French government asked it to delay the purchase following a trade dispute with America. Tiffany responded by suing, claiming that LVMH was trying to use the coronavirus pandemic to lower the price of the acquisition. Associated British Foods, the owner of fast fashion retailer Primark, has issued a statement predicting it will lose £375 million due to the coronavirus lockdowns across England and Europe. In light of increasing restrictions on retail trading in countries across Europe due to COVID-19, Primark states that currently 19% of its total retail selling space is temporarily closed in the Republic of Ireland, France, Belgium, Wales, Catalonia in Spain and Slovenia. The British fashion group Arcadia has fallen into administration, leaving 13,000 jobs at risk. Arcadia's market share slumped from around 4.5% in 2015 to just 2.7% in 2020. The group's extensive portfolio of high street stores, which includes British high street staples like Topshop, Dorothy Perkins, Burton and Miss Selfridges, has long felt outdated. The collapse of the Arcadia Group marks the UK's largest corporate casualty of the pandemic so far. Yes, believe it or not, it is Christmas, so rather than end the show on a sour note, we will end with an interview I conducted with Dr. Philip Idayawar, recorded just after Britain became the first country in the world to vaccinate its citizens, a truly monumental turning point in the fight against the pandemic. These are the history makers, the first people in the UK and the world to receive the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine outside a clinical trial. People aged over 80, as well as care home workers and NHS staff, have been given the first batches as the mass vaccination programme is rolled out nationwide. For more on this, I'm now being joined by Dr. Philip Idayawar. Dr. Philip Idayawar, thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global. I know you're a busy man. I can see you in the hospital there. What a monumental moment it was on Tuesday morning. A 90-year-old British grandmother being the first person in the Western world to receive a COVID-19 vaccine. Can you just summarise how much of a historic and monumental moment that was in the fight against the pandemic?
It is massive. Thank you. And I mean, we have to recognise the fact that what the world of science have been able to achieve with the creation, the development of this vaccine is absolutely monumental. It takes years to develop a vaccine. Here we have a situation where building on past knowledge and building on strong foundations in science, within months, the medical world has been able to come up with a vaccine and delivered it to a person. And I think that having that old lady come forward to present herself to have this vaccine, I think that it's huge service to mankind for our benefits, all of us. And we really have to be grateful to everyone who participated on Tuesday to having this vaccine, considering all the conspiracy theories out there. I think that we all own every single person who came out on Tuesday to participate in this vaccination real time. We owe them a world of praise and thanks.
We absolutely do, and I agree with you there. There is so much misinformation. Usually when you talk about fake news, it's political. I have never seen so much, I wouldn't say anger, but really fear. And, you know, there are some pretty high-profile, prominent people. I've got friends, I'm sure as well, Dr. Philip, you have friends that are completely against the vaccine. Why do you think it is? Is it fear, or is there something more sinister behind this?
I mean, I just think that what we have witnessed since the arrival of COVID-19 has simply been the situation where the underlying causes of mistrust between citizens and governments just came to the surface, boiled over. People no longer trust government. I think that is the bottom line of what we have been witnessing. This is the reality. And I think that science should always be respected and separated from politics. This is what the world leaders need to begin to emphasize. Science is about facts. Science is evidence-based. And medical science, you know, without medical science, we will not be where we are today. We know the destruction of lives that has resulted in the past. Millions of people dying because basically the world of medicine just was not at that pace. Now we are able to do it.
I can't let you go without asking a really important issue, and this is about distribution in Africa. Oxfam recently released a report saying they expect 9 out of 10 people living in the world's poorest countries to miss out on a vaccine next year. 9 out of 10, which means the majority of people. There are about 300 vaccines doing the rounds at the moment in various stages of development. Will it get to Nigeria? Will it get to sub-Saharan Africa someday?
It definitely would, Juliana. We will have to be hopeful. But I do not think that the Pfizer vaccine in its current state, we can't access it because of the technology required for storage. But I think that what the Oxford group has done will be available to people in the sub-Saharan, less developed economies. But we need it. We are losing people as well. A good number of our high-profile middle-class individuals who are exposed, traveling around the world, are catching this virus, especially, and many of them are dying. So we need it. We need it in Nigeria, definitely, but not. I don't think that the Pfizer variant is something that we're able to afford. Not because of the cost, but because of the technology required.
Absolutely. It's that sub-zero temperature refrigeration, isn't it? But we've got doctors like you and exceptional doctors around the world and in country, so hopefully we'll get our own vaccine sometimes too. Dr. Philip Bidaya, well, thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global. Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today on our End of the Plague Year Channels Business Global special. As always, we ask you to please get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.